Hello, it's Sonia here with The Pretty Stitch. Welcome to my channel. If this is your first time joining me, I'm so happy to have you here. So today we are going to be doing a knitting tutorial. So you can see I have knitting needles. They're two different colors, but they are the same size. I don't know if you can see, they're number 8s. I couldn't find both of the same color, but they're the same size, number 8s. And we are going to be making a mitered square. So I am doing this tutorial because I started doing a knitting and crochet group at my church, and we have some stitchers there who are more beginners, and there is a beginner knitter in my group who wants to be able to make a project, and she doesn't like purling and she wants to be able to make a blanket. So I thought a mitered square would be a really great project because with this pattern you do not need to do any purling. It's all straight knit stitch, and I think she'll be able to make it. So I'm actually kind of making this tutorial for her and anyone else in the group that might want to try a simple knitting project. And so here's an example of a mitered square that I've already done in this multicolored yarn. I've actually done 3 of them. So let me get them here. So here we go. And I do have a contrasting color that I am going to be, actually I have 2 contrasting colors. So it's going to be the multicolored. There's a pink and also like a blue that's similar to this blue that I'm going to be making. And we are actually doing a service project of making baby blankets for our church. So that is going to be part of the service project. So I'm going to eventually attach them and turn them into a blanket. But I wanted to show you how to make a really simple mitered square. Now, you can make your square however size you want. So this one was made using these very same needles with, the yarn is probably like a DK weight yarn, a number 3. And I did a cast on of 64 stitches. But the one I'm going to show you, especially because it's for beginners, I'm going to cast on, we're going to do 20 stitches. So you can make, as I said, make it as big or as small as you would like, and just take these same principles that I'm going to show you and just apply them to however large you want to make your square. So with this project, it's better to do a long-tailed cast on. It just looks better. So we're going to cast on 20 stitches. So I'm going to use this dark blue. So if you've never done a long-tailed cast on, I'm going to try to show you. So I'm holding the yarn like that. I'm sticking my needle like that. Again, I'm more of a crocheter, so bear with me. So what you're going to do is you're going to twist your thumb. So you have your needle on here, you're going to twist your thumb, you're going to pick up the yarn on your thumb, and then you're also going to twist your needle around your index finger like that. And now you have a hole. You're going to put that through the hole and give it a pull. So we actually have 2 stitches on our hook. So you're going to repeat that. So we have our yarn. Going to go towards your thumb. It's almost like a figure 8. And then back through that hole and give it a pull. And we have 3 stitches, so I want to have 20. So when you're doing your mitered square, you always want to have an even number of stitches. So once you get the hang of the long tail cast on, you can actually do it pretty fast. That's why I like it. There's other cast ons that you can do, but for this project, long tail, it just creates the best edge for the mitered square. Now, if you are really having trouble with this long tail cast on, then, definitely just do whatever cast on you want, because you just want to, especially this is a beginner knitting project, so you just want to get the hang of things. And if you keep practicing, then eventually I'm sure you will master the long tail cast on. So I'm going to keep going here. I'm going to cast on my 20 stitches and I will meet you back. Okay, I have my 20 stitches on here. And the nice thing about this mitered square, there's different ways of knitted mitered squares, but I find this one to be the easiest, especially if you are a brand new knitter and only know how to do the knit stitch, you can make this. And the nice thing, as I said before, is you do not need to bind off any stitches. That's the beauty of this. So you're going to start off with 20 stitches and you're going to end up, as you keep going, with only 2 at the very end. So if you're struggling with binding off, you don't have to worry about that with this project. Okay, so for your row 1, you're just going to work a knit row. So far, super easy. We're just knitting row 1. So I'm going to go off camera. I'm going to knit my first row here and I will meet you back. Okay, so I have knit my first row, just straight knitting across. So what we want to do to help, it's hard to differentiate between the sides. So this is going to be, we're going to call it the right side, even though both sides are reversible, but this will just help you out and you'll understand why. So I'm going to mark this side, and I actually got this idea from another YouTuber, so thank you very much. That was a great tip. And so what I want to do is mark this side. And so this side that we're marking will always be the knitted side. So I'm just using a little tiny crochet hook. Again, I'm more of a crocheter. I have tons of crochet hooks. And I'm using a scrap piece of yarn that I have. If you have a stitch marker, you can actually just use a stitch marker to mark the side, but I'm always losing stitch markers, so I just use scraps of yarn. So let me try to get this through without splitting the yarn up too much. There we go. And I'm just going to tie this in the front here so that I know that this is my right side, or this will be the knitted side only. And then our next row we're going to do, row 2, is going to be where we are going to do some decreasing, and it's going to be very simple decreasing. So what you want to keep in mind is with your mitered square, as I said before, you want to make sure it's an even number. So we have 20 stitches on here. So what's 20 divided by 2? It's 10. And then so you know there's going to be 10 stitches on one side, 10 stitches on the other. So what you want to do with that number, so whatever number is you have, so I have 10, because 20 divided by 2 is 10. You want to minus 2. So 10 minus 2 is 8. So I want to knit 8 stitches. So for this guy here, as I said before, I've made this was 64 stitches. So 64 divided by 2 is 32. So I need to remember that 64 divided by 2 is 32, and then I minus 2, and that's 30 stitches. So it will make sense in a minute, but I just wanted to give you that example. So as I said before, 20 divided by 2 is 10, and then minus 2 is 8. So we are going to knit 8 stitches. Alright, so we have knit 8 stitches. So what you're going to do next is we are going to knit 2 together. So it's a decrease stitch. Very simple. So if you are a beginner knitter and you've never done this before, it's still making a knit stitch, but instead of inserting your needle into one loop, we're going to insert it into 2 loops. So I'm just putting it in 2 loops and just working that knit stitch, and we've done 1 knit together. So now we need to do it again. But another helpful tip, I don't usually do this because I can keep track of it, but especially if you are doing it with a lot of stitches on here, is put another stitch marker in the middle. This will mark the middle. Again, I don't have stitch markers, so here's a tip. If you do not have stitch markers, take a scrap piece of yarn, wrap it around your needle, and tie it in a knot, You don't want it super tight. You want to be able to sew it to move up and down, like so. And instant stitch marker. And I do suggest having it a contrasting color. You don't want to have it the same color as the color you're working. So this marks the middle of your square, and it is a helpful little tool if you need it. And I do suggest that if you're just starting out to use a stitch marker. So again, don't panic if you don't have stitch markers. You know, especially if you're a beginner, you might not have all the fancy tools, and that's okay. You don't need all the fancy tools. Just use a little scrap of yarn and it'll do the job. Okay, so the next 2 stitches we are going to knit together. So we're going to do the same thing. You're going to insert your needle under those 2 stitches and just knit them. There we go. So we knit them together. So now we have 8 stitches left. So we're just going to knit the last 8 stitches. And so at the end of your row 2, you will have 18 stitches on your needle. So each time you do a decrease row, you're going to decrease by 2. So we started off with 20, and by the time we're done our square, we will have only 2 stitches left, which is pretty cool. Alright, so we have knit row 2. So then row 3, we are back on the side of our little yarn in the front here. So right here where I tied it. This row is always just a straight knitted row. You don't have to worry about any decreasing, increasing, none of that. Just knit across. So I'm knitting 18 stitches across. Sorry, I feel like these needles, it's like clanking. I'm sorry, they're loud. Okay, so I'm still knitting this row. I just wanted to point out when you come to this yarny stitch marker that I've made, what you'll want to do is you can see that it's kind of knitted in with the fabric there. Just pull it and just stick it back on the other one like that. And you still got your stitch marker marking the middle of your... And so for those of you that are experienced knitters, you're probably like, you know, she doesn't know what she's doing, but which I don't maybe know exactly what I'm doing, but this is more for a straight up beginner, and you're probably thinking, you experienced knitters, you know, get yourself a decent stitch marker, but again, I always lose them, and this is more for people that maybe, you know, don't have the fancy tools yet, and so you just work with what you've got. Alright, so we have finished row 3 there, just straight knitting across. So now we're going to do row 4. Sorry again for the clanking. And we now have 18 stitches. So you're going to do the same thing as you did for the other row. You're going to divide 18 by 2, so that is 9, and then you're going to minus 2, and that's 7. So we are going to knit 7 stitches, and then we will decrease 2, knit 2 together, and knit 2 together again, and then knit the final 7 stitches. So 1, 2. So now if you're using your stitch marker there, you don't really have to do the dividing too much, because you'll see there's 2 stitches. So the 2 stitches before the stitch marker are the ones that you would knit 2 together. And then I'm just sliding that guy over and then knitting those 2 together, and then knitting the final 7. So at the end of this row, we're going to have 16 stitches. Okay, so you can see it's kind of looking like a V right there. So my next row, this is the row we have this yarn we tied in front. This is just a straight knit row, so I'm going to do that off camera. Okay, so now we are back to a decreased row. So we have 16 stitches. So that means 16 divided by 2 is 8, and then minus 2 is 6. So we will knit 6 stitches, work 2 together, and then knit 2 together again, and then work the final 6. So I'm going to keep, and then the following row will be a knit row. So you're just alternating back and forth. One row is your decrease row where you're knitting 2 together, and then your other row is just a straight knit row. So I'm going to keep going and do that until we have maybe 6 stitches left, and because sometimes when you get close to the end it might be a little confusing, so I want to just show how to do that. So I'm going to do that and I will meet you back. Alright, so we're getting close to the end here. I have 6 stitches left on my hook. So what we'll want to do is just still keep with the pattern here. So now I just need to knit 1 stitch because I'm already at my 2. So knit those 2 together. Move my stitch marker over and then knit the other 2 together. And then knit the last one. So now I have 4 stitches. So now we just knit these guys across. Okay, so now we're at our final 4 stitches. So to complete our square, we're going to knit these 2 together because now we're just at 4 and there's our stitch marker marking in the middle. So we just knit them 2 together. Get my needle under there. I crochet tightly, I tend to knit tightly too. I can't escape that. So I'm going to knit these 2 together. Actually going to pull out my stitch marker. There we go, don't need it anymore. Knit these last 2 together. And now we just have 2 stitches on our needle. So what I like to do is I just pull that out. Again, I do have plenty of crochet hooks here. But if you didn't, you would cut the yarn, which let me find my scissors real quick and cut my yarn. Okay, so I cut my yarn here. What I usually like to do is I'll just take my crochet hook and then I just thread that through like so. But if you do not have a crochet hook, you can also use a yarn needle and then just thread that and then just pull that through your loops there, or you can even try to guide it through with your fingers. So then you can remove this guy and your little mitered square is all done. And the nice thing is it's pretty reversible there. So you can make a whole bunch of these and sew them together to create a blanket, or you could even, if you made it out of cotton yarn, you would have a cute little scrubby, or even a slightly larger one, a washcloth, or whatever you wanted to do with it. And I like the fabric a lot. It's nice and squishy, but it's a very easy project. So you can see this one was made with 20, and then again, here's comparison of 64, how much larger. And with the 64, I actually used the same exact needles that you saw me make this guy. So it's actually the same needles. And it's just fun to see the comparison of 20 versus 64. So you can have a lot of fun making these mitered squares and, you know, getting creative with it. And eventually I will sew these together to create a baby blanket. So I hope you enjoyed this project, and if you did, please like and subscribe, and thank you so much for watching.